Hello everybody, welcome to this webinar this morning. Well, if it is this morning, wherever you are, we've got a huge audience. We've got over 100 people involved, which is fantastic. So welcome to everyone. This is going to be a short, sharp session on using Grow as a leadership coaching model. And some of you would have been exposed, of course, to this model before, but I'm going to make the assumption that you know nothing about it, so that I'm not going to, I'll make sure that I'm pretty thorough in my approach. Now, I just want to make sure that I'm being heard. Could I just ask you, if you look over on the right-hand side, you'll see a question box there. And if I could just ask you to write in the word clear, or type in the word clear, I should say, that will let me know that I'm coming across loud and clear. Good. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, John. Anyone else? Hopefully it's not just those two. Okay. All right. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Marita. Thanks, Jason. Okay. Sounds like I'm coming across loud and clear, which is great. So that's wonderful to hear. Now, the other thing is, at the end of this presentation, I will be sending you a set of slides and also a recording of the presentation, so you can just relax and enjoy. It may not happen this afternoon, but you'll certainly get it within the next 48 hours. So you will receive that as a result of registering. Okay, so I was speaking to someone last night who actually is in the webinar today, the audience. I won't mention who it is, but I just told him that I was quite amazed by how popular this webinar is, but I guess the Grow model has stood the test of time. The Grow model was actually put together by John Whitmore, and John put this together as a process, and it's a very easy process to remember and a very effective one to use. So I'll be explaining that to you very clearly. So if you've got any questions, any comments, any observations whatsoever, where you just typed in clear, or where I showed you to type in clear, you can just write in or type in your questions at that point. And I'm the only one that actually sees that. So as soon as I see a question or a comment, I'll respond to it, irrespective of where I am in the presentation. That way we don't have this awkward 5-minute pause while people are waiting, or I'm waiting for others to type in their question or comment at the end. So there'll be no questions necessarily at the end, but all the way through, and that would be very useful. And I promise to keep that as interactive as I can by responding as soon as I see something when it comes up on the screen. All right, so basically there's 3 things that we want to get out of this morning's session. I think the first thing is just to give you an overview of what Grow looks like, what it stands for, just some of the questions are revolving around what Grow actually entails. I want to talk a little bit about how it actually works. So how you might use it in your leadership and when you can use it. And the great thing about this, of course, is that straight after this session, you can start using it, because you'll find that there are incidents in the corridor, in the boardroom, in the lunchroom. There are lots and lots of places where you can use this immediately. So that's the good news. It is something that can be applied immediately, and I would encourage you to do that. And then the final thing we'll do in the session is why it works. So we'll actually look at some of the benefits of it and actually just look at a little bit behind the science of it. Why does it actually work, and why is it an effective coaching methodology for leadership, for leaders? Every single one of us who are in this broadcast today have had situations where people have knocked on our door if we've got an office, or at least come and interrupted us and said, and they've asked us for some feedback or a comment about something. And in the back of our mind, we know very, very well that that's not the sort of thing that we should be interrupted about. In other words, the person that is talking to us should know the answer to that. And often what we do is we spend a fair bit of time listening to all the complaints and barriers and all the rest behind it. 45 minutes later, nothing's resolved except the fact that they have taken the monkey off their back and put it on your back. So using the Grow model, we can actually enable people to resolve their own issues, which is really, really important. I don't like the word empowerment. I think it's overused, and I think it's probably not used correctly. I like the word enable, and I think what GROW does is it enables people, and I think that's the point. And as the old saying goes, we're teaching people how to fish, not catching the fish for them. So that's essentially how that works. So they're the three things we want to get out of this session this morning. So what does GROW stand for? Now, GROW stands for goal, reality, options, and way forward. Now, you will get some variations on the W, depending. If you go and Google GROW, you'll get, where to from here, what next. You'll get a range of different variations, but essentially the W is basically the rubber meeting the road. That is, getting on and getting something done. So, and the beautiful thing about this methodology is it's all based on a series of questions. So in other words, it's not about you giving people the benefit of your wisdom, although sometimes it's very tempting to do that, although you may notice it doesn't always work. So what we're trying to do in the GROW model is to get people to respond to their own concerns. In other words, not to leave their brain in a paper bag at the door, but to bring their brain to work with them. And what we're doing with GROW is we're putting them into a situation where they've got to think through the dilemma they're in or the problem that they're facing, rather than us spoon feeding them and giving them an answer. Now, the more you do that, of course, the more you are making people dependent upon you. And ironically, the more people will come and interrupt you, because they know that they'll get a quick answer from you. And that's that whole concept of them taking the monkey off their back and putting it on your back. Not good. So what we want to do is make people accountable and enable them to be able to resolve their issues. So it is actually a coaching methodology, and it can be used in two ways. It can be used impromptu, or it can be used in a formal setting. So you can plan a coaching session around it, or if somebody interrupts you in the corridor, we can use a corridor coaching approach, which is GROW, and we can use it on the spur of the moment. And the great thing about it, of course, is that it's easy to remember. Everybody can remember GROW, and it really isn't that difficult to work out goal, reality, option, and where to from here, or way forward. So the key questions that you can see on your screen there are the key questions that underpin each of the steps in the process. So usually what happens is when people come to you, normally what they want to do is offload or download, whichever way you want to put it, and they're going to tell you all about the barriers and all the problems, and they're going to tell you a whole range of things. And all of us have been to enough sort of programs around communication, and we've been told that we're supposed to listen and we're supposed to keep quiet, bite our tongue until it bleeds, listen to what the person's saying. But unfortunately, that's not always a very effective approach, because the person, as I said earlier, could be downloading for 45 minutes and nothing's actually achieved. So, you've got to actually then be able to turn the conversation around and talk to the person about what do they want as an outcome. Now, if you think about it, if someone comes to you with a problem or an issue and they can't work out what the ideal outcome is, that's problematic, isn't it? So we want people to be able to at least work out what the end result is. What do they want out of this? So we ask them, and so we get people onto the front foot, and what happens is they start talking about what it is they're trying to achieve. So once they've articulated that, which shouldn't be too much of a difficulty, we can then move on to the next set of questions, and I'm going to share with you a number of different questions here, but the next set of questions is around the current state. In other words, what's stopping you get from where you are to where you need to be, because obviously that's why they've interrupted you. So now we can talk about the barriers, but the beautiful thing about the R in GROW is that if people start going off on tangents around other issues that they have no control over, or don't actually have any direct or even indirect impact on the issue, we can actually politely stop them and say, look, is this actually a barrier for you achieving what you want to achieve? So in other words, we can cut down significantly in a credible way a lot of that downloading that people will inevitably do if you're willing to sit there passively. And then, of course, once we've then got a gap, if you like, between the G and the R, where do they want to go and where are they now? The next step is to actually ask them for a number of opportunities or possibilities. So this is the brainstorming session where you're getting them to come up with the answers. And I might say to you, this is going to be difficult. I notice, looking at the attendance list today, there's a lot of you who are highly technically trained. And it would be so easy for you just to give people the answer, and undoubtedly you'd be right. And you may also rationalise that it'll be done quickly and they're off your back and away they go. Trouble with that, of course, is that they haven't owned the information. They've been very reliant upon you, and sometimes that can give you a sugar hit. You can think, wow, people find me very useful, and, so you've got to be able to get people to actually come up with their own answers. Now, the way forward, of course, is what do we need to do? What do we need to commit to? So that's getting people to commit to a response or an answer as a result of this particular coaching session. So you could actually literally have a coaching session asking just 4 questions. That's the interesting thing. You could ask, for example, what are you trying to achieve? What's stopping you? What are your options? And what do you need to do next? Coaching session done. Now, usually it's a bit more complicated than that, of course, as we know, but nevertheless, it is possible that you could actually steer the conversation using 4 specific questions, and you will find that it is very powerful. Now, I note that some people in this webinar have been in programs of mine in the past, and you'd be aware that I've actually used Grow, where I've actually asked people to think about an issue, and I've gone through a series of questions in a classroom setting where we've got 40 people in the classroom. I don't know any of their issues. All I'm doing is asking them a series of questions. And what's really interesting is that after the exercise, people's level of optimism in resolving the problem has inevitably gone up significantly as a result of the questions that I've asked, even though I don't know what it is that I'm resolving or helping to resolve. We've just got a statement here. I'm not here to do your thinking for you. Standard response in most situations. Thanks, Terry. Yeah, that's not a bad way to go. I'm not here doing your thinking for you, because some people will actually say to you, well, look, I've come to you because I've got an issue and I know you've got the answer. Well, that's not the point, is it? The point is you want to make them self-sufficient. You want to enable them to come up with the decision. So yes, Terry, thank you. You can often come up with a response like that can be quite useful. So let's go through this a little bit more in depth, and let's have a look at some of the questions that you could ask around each of these 4 steps that might assist you. Now, you obviously pick the ones that you feel comfortable with, and of course it also depends clearly on what it is that we're talking about. But here's some that will work for you, I'm sure. So for you to be satisfied in this situation, what would it look like? So what's the ideal outcome? What are you trying to achieve? That might be for something that's fairly straightforward and technically focused. How will you know you're successful? And what are you aiming for? Now, you don't have to ask all of those questions. In fact, you could probably get away with asking one of those questions, and then you don't move on, basically, until that person is able to paint a clear picture of what the ideal outcome is. Now, you might say to me, well, what if they don't know? Well, if they don't know, then you probably should challenge them to go away and think about that before you can help them. Because if they're not sure what outcome they want, it's going to be pretty hard for you to help them anyway, isn't it? So you challenge them to think carefully about what the ideal outcome is. And the other benefit, as I sort of alluded to earlier, was that by doing that, you are preventing a whole lot of downloading about a whole lot of issues that you can actually do nothing about, and neither can they, but you sit there politely and passively listening to all of these issues when in actual fact you're not really doing anything to help them solve the problem. All right, so there's some questions that might help you. Now, once you've done that and you've got a clear picture of where you're going, the next step is to move on to the R, which will come up on your screen very soon, which is the reality. There we go. So now what we're doing is we're actually asking people to discuss this current situation. All right, now this is where we can actually get a handle on what's actually happening right now. So what sort of questions could we ask there? Well, what are the key things getting in the way of you achieving this goal or outcome? That's a pretty good question to ask. So what you're doing, you see, is you're defining the barriers that are preventing the person from going from A to B. And you're getting them to articulate what those barriers are so that they're not raising things that are not necessarily barriers, which is often what people do. You know, people will often raise things that are outside their control or have nothing actually to do directly or even indirectly with the situation that they're trying to resolve. So what are the barriers to success? Might be another question you could ask. Or what's actually stopping you? And can you identify the obstacles? All right, so there's a whole bunch of different questions there. And again, you don't have to ask them all. It's not the point. But by asking some of those, you are then in a position where you can actually discuss what the barriers might be. Okay. Now, once you've done that, we've got a very clear picture of where the person wants to go or what the end result is that they want, and we've got a very clear picture of what the key barriers are that's preventing the person from achieving that success. Now, that's not a bad start. If you achieve nothing else, you're probably in a pretty good position just by doing that. But obviously, they've come to you because they want a solution, and this is when they do come to you. But of course, you can use this, as I'll talk a little bit later, when you're actually planning a coaching session. Now, we went too far there. I'll go back one. We go to the next step, which is about options. Now, when I say options, you'll notice it's plural. So what I'm really interested in here as the leader is to get the person on the receiving end, the coachee, if you like, to articulate to me some of the potential options that are open and available to them to resolve this. And normally in most situations, there are a couple of different ways of resolving the situation. And of course, if it's very complex, there are many, many ways. So what I'm going to do is, and I warn you, for those of you who are very technically focused, I warn you that this is the most difficult of the letters in GROW to deal with. Why? Because you're a technical expert. Why? Because they know you're a technical expert. And why? Because seems to be much easier just to spoon feed them and give the answer. But that's not coaching, is it? That's telling. So what are we actually going to do right here? Okay, here are some questions that you could ask. So what have you thought about doing to resolve this? Now, the implication of that is that you should have thought about something to resolve it before you've come to me. So it's a really good question, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, if I wasn't here, what would you do? Which, incidentally, is probably not a bad question either to ask. If people challenge you and say, oh, I was hoping you could give me the answer, we say, well, if I wasn't here, what would you be doing? So what are your options is a pretty standard question you can ask. So just get the person to identify what the options are. You don't have to get a whiteboard out or anything like that. Just brainstorm with them about the options. And the most important thing for you to do at this point is to bite your tongue until it bleeds and not give them the answer. Because once you've done that, you've let them off the hook. They've learnt nothing except to come to you when they want an answer. That's what they've learnt. And that means that they'll continually interrupt you for a whole range of matters that you know you shouldn't be interrupted about. Or, how can I help you to resolve this? Right? So, oh, well, that's why I've come to you. Well, what are you thinking of doing? So that's the way you can follow in from there. Or what are some other possibilities? Now, you'll notice that last question's a good one, because after they've given you an option, what you need to do then is to take it to the next level and say, well, you know, what other options might be available to you that perhaps you haven't thought about? What else could you do in the situation? So what you're trying to do is to stimulate some conversation around some of the different ways and means of going, because by generating a series of options, you are building up hope that there are a number of ways of dealing with this particular issue. And that's a good thing, because if you do that, then they come out of it realizing there are some things that they can do. So once we've got several options on the table, the next step is for you to help them get an action plan together. So we move on to step 4, which will come up on your screen very soon. So keep the questions rolling in the comments, folks, if you've got them, because I'd be keen to take some of those as well. The final step in the process is the way forward. So what we're trying to do here is generate a bit of an action plan as to what the person can do next as they leave your office or they leave you. What will they be doing next that might be helpful? So let's have a look at a couple of those questions. So you could ask, which of these options is the most feasible? Now I know that you know which is the most feasible. I know you know that. Actually, they know that you know that. But that's not the point, is it? The point is you're trying to get them to think, to bring their brains with them, to engage. So which of these options is the most feasible? Now you might say, this is taking a long time. Why don't I just tell them and off they go? Well, you're saving time, because every single time you use grow, they're going to think to themselves, oh no, not that whole lot of questions again. Perhaps I should think this through before I pop in and see the boss. So you've actually saved your time, self-time, either by them doing their preparation or them thinking, oh, well, I think I've got the answer anyway. So why have you chosen that course of action might be another question you might ask. What's the next step? It's a great question, because I actually like the one, I use it a lot. I say, well, as soon as you leave here, what's the first thing you're going to do? And that gets them into action, okay? So what support would you need from me or others in order to get this plan moving? And so, you want them to walk out of your presence with some semblance of understanding of what they need to do next in order to resolve or to solve or to do whatever they need to do. So you can see that it's a very simple process, and I can tell you now it's highly, highly effective. Now, what I suggest you do, if you've got, as you can see in the back office here, I've got a whiteboard on the board. If you've got a whiteboard in your office, or even on your laptop here, or wherever you're viewing this, you could actually put the words GROW somewhere where it's handy and you'll see it. So it'll just remind you that every single time that you're interrupted about something, instead of giving them a quick answer, you think, grow, that's right, I remember that now. And then you can launch in and say, what are you trying to achieve? And then you're off and running once you've got the G out of the way. All right, now, what sort of places could you use this? Well, as I mentioned before, or I've been mentioning, the impromptu meetings is a very good, whenever people interrupt you about something, launch straight into grow. If you're sitting down with somebody and you're coaching them on something, instead of just giving them all the information straight away, how about we start to ask questions around GROW? So it can be very useful when you're coaching people in a planned session. It can be great for problem solving, and you could do this even in your group meetings. What are we trying to achieve here, guys? What's stopping us? What are our options? What do we need to do next? What's our first thing we've got to do in this whole process in order to achieve success? When you're delegating work to people, that can be very effective. At the beginning of a project, start brainstorming some ways and means of moving forward. You could do this during a check-in halfway through a project, and where are we at? What's our main goal here? What are there any barriers in the way at the moment? What are our options around getting around those barriers, and what do we need to do? How do we recalibrate based on our conversation today? And of course, in between check-ins. So it's really applicable in all sorts of situations. And, you know, the key point, there's two key points that you need to know here. And one is, this is you asking questions, not answering questions. So not being the technical expert. And secondly, the key point is that you need to have this at top of mind all the time, because you never know when you're going to be interrupted. You never know when you're going to get a chance to use Grow. So have this front of mind, write it down somewhere or have it handy. Okay, so when you're aligning performance, and I'll just go through these fairly briefly. So what are your performance goals? Where are we in terms of progress? Has something changed? And so forth. So you can actually align it to performance as well. You can, for the R, you can talk about barriers to achieving the goals. So what sort of things are getting in the way? What sort of challenges are you facing? How's your workload, which is a very typical one that people will often talk about. All right, and when you get to the O, it's what are your options for resolving this? What other things could you try? Is there anyone you could call upon for support? So, you know, you can use this in performance management as well. Not so much performance management in the formal sense, but really developmental conversations that I bang on a lot about in my latest book. And then the W is, what's the next step? What can I do to assist? What needs to change? All right, so that sort of gets people spurred into action and gets them to get results on the board and so forth. So there's a lot of particular ways that you can use that in performance as well. So just coming towards the end now, and if you've got any questions, comments, observations, put them in the chat box there, and in the question box there, and I'm happy to respond to those before we finish up. So look, while we're at it, let's just talk about the benefits of Grow. Let's try and bring all this together, this short session. Well, the obvious benefit of Grow is it's simple, isn't it? I mean, everyone can remember Grow, and everyone can remember what GROW stands for. So the first important thing is it's simple. There are lots of coaching methodologies and leadership coaching methodologies out there that are quite complex. It's almost as if you need a degree just to learn how to, you know, what it means. But with Grow, it's just a simple process of going through. As I mentioned, it can be used in all sorts of situations, both, you know, in a reactive and a proactive mode. So you can use it. The key benefit of Grow is you're enabling others to act. So in other words, it's creating a situation where they're actually acting rather than you spoon feeding them. And that's the bane of a lot of managers' lives, that they get interrupted about a range of things when in the back of their mind they know darn well that they really, that is the person interrupting them, knows the answer to that. So it enables others to act, which essentially is the next key benefit, is that Grow will save you enormous time. So every time, use Grow and you'll cut the time in terms of the solving of the problem. And secondly, you'll be training people to start thinking about some of the answers to these questions that you and they know will inevitably be asked. All right, so that's a benefit as well with Grow. And of course, the final benefit of all of this is that it actually does work. And that's the great thing about it. It really works, and it works really, really well. And if you haven't tried it, I'm suggesting to you that it might be a wonderful thing to try. All right, so we've just got a question or a statement here. Actually, two. How can we use Grow when it is time sensitive? Well, Robin, the key thing there is just to say, you know, use four questions. What are we, you know, what's the end game here? What's stopping you? What are your options? What do you need to do next? You could literally get it done in 4 sessions, right? But not to use the time-sensitive issue as an excuse not to do Grow, because if you do that, then you'll find we're always tight. There's always going to be some barrier or whatever there. Can we get a copy of the screens from the webinar? Absolutely, Catherine. You'll be getting the slides, and you'll also get the recording at the end of this presentation. So thanks for asking. All right. Now, I just want to quickly mention that I have a Lunch and Learn program coming up in a couple of weeks' time, the 29th of June. If you're interested or you've got people in your team that are interested, it's very cost effective and very effective because it's all done online. So it saves you significant costs. And you can see that there are 6 modules there that I'm covering that are all pretty relevant, frankly, to anyone in a leadership role. So I've picked those because they're the critically important units of study that we do. And each session's an hour long, and we usually meet online once not usually, we do meet online once a fortnight. There's homework given. People have to go off and try things like I'm suggesting for you today to go off and use Grow. Grow's mentioned, of course, in it. And so if you are interested, just send me an email because I will send you out a detailed flyer which has got the costings and what the program looks like and some testimonials. Happy to do that, and so just have to send me an email, and I'm more than happy to send you out some information about the next Lunch and Learn. But be quick because it's not that far away. So thanks, folks. I think that's it. I've got a couple of one more here. Great. Thank you, Therese. Great way to structure and focus a conversation and supervision. Valuable development tool. Thanks, Tim. And Kieran, Tim, I need to learn to use Grow, and I might find some more time to deal with things. Thank you. Insightful. Thanks, Jill. All good. Sounds like I might have hit the mark. So, guys, thank you. I wish you well. And if I can help you in any way, then please contact me. Thank you for your time. And I wish you all the best and have a great day. And don't forget to use Grow.